A child's crayon drawing sliding into frame, stick figures, red crayon, something off about it. A 6-year-old boy started drawing murders. Detailed ones, accurate ones. And then, 3 weeks later, one of those exact murders happened, 2 towns over. But that's not the scary part. The scary part is what he drew next was his own house. Quiet suburban street, morning light, kids' bikes on a lawn. Hey y'all, welcome back. So I gotta be honest with you right off the bat. This is one of those stories where, when I first found it, I didn't believe it. I thought it was internet legend, Reddit ghost story type stuff. But the deeper I dug, the more documentation I found. Police reports, news archives, a psychological evaluation. This thing is real, y'all. Or at least, the parts that can be verified are real. And the parts that can't be verified are going to keep you up tonight regardless. This is the story of a little boy named Ethan Caldwell, 6 years old. Lived in a quiet little subdivision outside of Springfield, Missouri with his mom, his dad, and his older sister. A totally normal family. Totally normal kid. Until one random Tuesday in October, when Ethan sat down at the kitchen table with a box of crayons and drew something that made his mother's blood run cold. And that was just the beginning. By the end of this video, you're going to be questioning a lot of things. About kids. About fear. About whether some of us are wired to see things the rest of us can't. Let's get into it. Suburban kitchen, crayons scattered on a table, morning cereal bowls. Okay, so let's meet the Caldwell family. Marissa Caldwell was a stay-at-home mom. Used to work in HR before she had her kids, but stepped back when her daughter was born. Greg Caldwell, her husband, worked as a regional sales manager, traveled a few days a week, but was mostly around. They had a 10-year-old daughter, Sophie, who was your classic big sister. Bossy, sweet, protective of her little brother in that very specific older sibling way. And then there was Ethan, 6 years old, kindergarten. The kind of kid teachers describe as quiet but observant. He wasn't a big talker. He liked dinosaurs, he liked drawing, and he liked his stuffed elephant named Sir Trunks a lot. Which, yeah, Sophie named that one. You can tell. Crayon drawings, generic kid art, dinosaurs, suns with smiley faces. Up until that October, Ethan's drawings were exactly what you'd expect from a 6-year-old. Dinosaurs eating other dinosaurs. The family dog. Stick figure versions of his family standing in front of a stick figure house with a smiling yellow sun in the corner. Totally normal kid stuff. Marissa had a whole drawer in the kitchen just full of his art. The fridge was basically a gallery. So when Ethan came to the table that Tuesday afternoon and started drawing, nobody thought anything of it. Marissa was making dinner. Sophie was doing homework at the same table. Ethan had his crayons spread out, totally focused, the way kids get when they're really locked into something. About 20 minutes later, he held up his drawing and said, completely casual, like he was showing off a picture of a puppy, "Look, Mommy, the bad man got her." Marissa walked over, expecting to see a dinosaur eating somebody, or a superhero fighting a villain, or something silly like that. What she saw instead was a drawing of a woman lying on the ground, dark red scribbles around her, a figure standing over her holding something in their hand, and in the background, a very specific, very detailed image of a red door with a number on it. 247. Close-up suggestion of crayon textures, dark red color, abstract, not graphic. Now, I want to pause here and say, kids draw weird stuff sometimes. Death, violence, scary things. Child psychologists will tell you this is actually really common and usually totally harmless. Kids process big concepts. Death, fear, danger, through art and play. It doesn't mean anything is wrong. So Marissa, to her credit, didn't panic. She asked Ethan, gently, "Who's the bad man, baby?" And Ethan just shrugged and said, "I don't know. He was just there." She asked him where he saw this. Did he see it on TV? Did one of the older kids at school show him something? Ethan said, very matter of fact, like he was answering a totally normal question, "I didn't see it. I just knew it." Marissa let it go. Put the drawing in the drawer with the rest of his art. Made a mental note to maybe limit his screen time, just in case he'd seen something on YouTube he shouldn't have. She did not think about it again. Until 4 days later, when Ethan drew another one. Calendar pages flipping, days passing, crayon box, dim kitchen lighting at dusk. The second drawing was different. More detailed. Ethan was getting better, not in a kid getting better at art way, but in a way that made Marissa's stomach turn. This drawing showed a man, clearly an adult male figure, slumped over what looked like a steering wheel. Red scribbles again. And outside the car window, a sign. Ethan had drawn letters. Not perfect, kindergarten-level letters, but legible. It said, Oak Ridge. Marissa didn't know any Oak Ridge. Not in their town. She asked Ethan about it, and he gave the same kind of answer as before, vague, dreamy, like he was recalling something rather than imagining it. The man was tired. Somebody made him tired forever. Now here's where Greg, Ethan's dad, comes into the story. Greg got home from a work trip that weekend, and Marissa showed him both drawings. Greg, being a pretty logical, no-nonsense kind of guy, did what most dads would do. He laughed it off, said kids go through phases, said maybe Ethan had seen something scary on a show, or maybe one of his classmates had older siblings who talked about scary movies, and it bled into his imagination. He's 6 March. 6-year-olds think monsters live under the bed. This is the same thing. Marissa wanted to believe that. She really did. Local news intro graphic style, generic news desk aesthetic, small-town news vibe. But 3 weeks after that second drawing, on a random Thursday evening while the family was eating dinner, the local news ran a segment that made Marissa drop her fork. A man had been found dead in his car. Carbon monoxide poisoning ruled a homicide after investigators found the exhaust pipe had been deliberately blocked, and there was evidence of a struggle beforehand. The location? A small access road just outside a residential development called Oak Ridge Estates. About 40 minutes from where the Caldwells lived, Marissa sat there, fork frozen halfway to her mouth, staring at the TV. Sophie asked what was wrong. Marissa didn't answer. She just got up from the table, walked to the kitchen drawer, and pulled out Ethan's drawing. The slumped-over man, the steering wheel, the red scribbles, the sign that said Oak Ridge. Greg came and stood next to her. He looked at the drawing, looked at the TV, looked at the drawing again. He didn't laugh this time. Dark living room, TV glow, 2 adults standing in silence. Now look, I want to be real with y'all here, because I always try to be transparent on this channel about what's verified and what's anecdotal. The news report about the Oak Ridge homicide? That's documented. That happened. It's in the local news archives. It's a real case. The investigation was real. The drawing and the timeline the Caldwells describe? That part comes from the family's own account, which they later shared, first with a local reporter and eventually with a research team that got involved later in this story. There's no way to independently verify the exact date Ethan made that drawing versus when the crime occurred, because, well, it's a kid's drawing that sat in a kitchen drawer. Nobody was timestamping it. But here's what makes this story different from just being a coincidence that got blown out of proportion online. Because Ethan didn't stop at 2 drawings. Child's bedroom, nightlight glow, shadows on the wall. After the Oak Ridge news segment, Marissa was not sleeping right. She started watching Ethan more closely. Not in a paranoid, hovering way, or at least, she tried not to be, but she was paying attention now. Really paying attention. And about 2 weeks after the news segment aired, Ethan came downstairs one morning before school with another drawing. This one made Marissa's hands shake. It showed a house. A pretty detailed house for a 6-year-old's drawing. A house with a red front door, a tree out front, and this is the part that got Marissa, a very specific, very recognizable crack pattern on the driveway that matched, almost exactly, the actual crack pattern on their own driveway. The one that had been there since a delivery truck backed into it 2 summers ago. In the drawing, there were 3 figures standing outside the house. And one figure, small, with what looked like yellow hair, just like Ethan's, was lying on the ground near the mailbox. Marissa asked him, voice shaking, trying to stay calm for his sake. Ethan, baby, is this our house? And Ethan looked at the drawing for a long moment, tilted his head, the way kids do when they're really thinking about something. He said, I don't want to draw it anymore. It's loud. What's loud, baby? The picture. It won't stop being loud until I draw it. Tense kitchen scene suggestion, parent looking at child with concern now. Greg and Marissa had a long talk that night. A really long talk. And to their credit, and I think this matters a lot in this story, they didn't go straight to, our son is psychic, or, our son is cursed, or any of that. They went straight to what any responsible parent should do. They called a child psychologist. Dr. Renata Alvarez was a child psychologist based in Springfield who specialized in early childhood trauma and unusual behavioral patterns. The Caldwells brought Ethan in for an evaluation, brought all 3 drawings with them, and laid out the entire timeline. Dr. Alvarez, by all accounts, took it very seriously, not because she believed Ethan had some kind of supernatural ability, but because there were a few things about his behavior that concerned her clinically. First, Ethan described the drawings using language that didn't match typical kindergarten-level imagination. He didn't say things like, "I made this up," or "I pretended." He used phrases like, "It showed me," and "it wanted out." That kind of dissociative language, describing your own thoughts or creative impulses as something separate from yourself, something with its own will, is something clinicians pay close attention to, especially in young children, because it can be an early indicator of several different things. Sometimes it's just an active imagination paired with dramatic language a kid picked up from a show. Sometimes it's something more clinically significant. Second, and this is the part that really got Dr. Alvarez's attention, Ethan was experiencing physical symptoms before each drawing. Headaches. According to Marissa, Ethan would complain that his head felt full or buzzy in the hours before he sat down to draw one of the disturbing images. And the headache would stop completely the moment he finished the drawing. Clinical office, soft lighting, children's drawings pinned to a wall in a therapist's office. Dr. Alvarez ordered a full pediatric neurological workup, just to be thorough, to rule out anything physiological, seizures, migraines with unusual presentations, anything that could potentially explain both the physical symptoms and unusual behavior. The results came back completely normal. Ethan was a healthy 6-year-old boy. No abnormalities. Nothing on any scan that would explain what was happening. Dr. Alvarez told the Caldwells something that, according to Marissa, she has never forgotten. She said, "I can't give you a clean clinical explanation for everything you're describing. What I can tell you is that Ethan does not appear to be in distress about the content of what he's drawing. He's in distress about the compulsion to draw it. That distinction matters. Whatever this is, it's not coming from a disturbed mind. It's coming from somewhere else, through a mind that's trying to process it the only way it knows how, through crayons." That is, hands down, one of the eeriest things a medical professional has ever said in any case I've covered on this channel. Nighttime suburban street, single porch light on, quiet and still. After the evaluation, the Caldwells did everything right. They followed Dr. Alvarez's recommendations. Reduced Ethan's screen time even further, even though they'd already cut it way back. Kept a consistent bedtime. Tried to create stability and routine, since that's generally the first line of approach with unusual childhood behavioral patterns. Consistency, security, predictability. For about 3 weeks, nothing happened. No drawings. No headaches. Ethan seemed like a totally regular kid again, playing with Sir Trunks a lot, fighting with Sophie over the TV remote, the whole 9 yards. Marissa started to relax. Started to think maybe it really had just been some kind of weird developmental phase, like Greg said from the beginning. Maybe the Oak Ridge thing really was just an unsettling coincidence amplified by a stressed-out mother's imagination. Then, on a Sunday night in late November, Ethan woke up screaming. Marissa and Greg both ran to his room. He was sitting up in bed, drenched in sweat, clutching his head, saying the same thing over and over. "Make it stop being loud. Make it stop being loud." They calmed him down, got him water, sat with him, and after about 20 minutes, Ethan, still trembling, asked for his crayon's dark bedroom, small hands gripping crayons, intense focus. Marissa hesitated. Every instinct told her not to give them to him. But Ethan was visibly suffering, genuinely in distress, and Dr. Alvarez had actually told them something important during the evaluation. Forcibly preventing Ethan from drawing, when he was in this state, seemed to make the physical symptoms, the headaches, significantly worse. The drawing appeared to function almost like a release valve. So Marissa, hands shaking, got the crayons. What Ethan drew that night is the drawing that the family has described as the one that changed everything. It showed their house again. Same red door. Same crack in the driveway. But this time, there were more details. A broken window on the side of the house, the side where Sophie's bedroom was. A figure at the back door, holding something long in their hand. And written across the top of the page, in shaky, uneven kindergarten handwriting, were 3 words that Ethan doesn't even fully know how to spell correctly under normal circumstances. He comes back. Marissa said later that she has never, in her entire life, felt fear like that. Not fear for herself, fear for her children. A very specific, very primal kind of fear. Greg, who up until this point had remained skeptical, logical, level-headed Greg, made a decision that night that he later admitted he couldn't fully explain to anyone, including himself. He checked every lock in the house. Then he called the local police department's non-emergency line, just to ask. Almost embarrassed to even be asking whether there had been any reported break-ins, prowlers, or suspicious activity in their specific neighborhood recently. Police dispatch desk, phone call visual, quiet tension. The dispatcher told him something that made the entire situation even more unsettling. There had been a report 2 nights earlier. A neighbor 3 houses down had called in after spotting someone walking through backyards late at night, going from house to house, seemingly checking windows and doors. No further sightings since. No suspect identified. Case still open, but quiet. The Caldwells had not heard about this. It hadn't made the news. It was a minor report, the kind of thing that happens in a lot of neighborhoods and usually amounts to nothing. But Ethan's drawing, made that same night, hours before Greg even made that call, showed a figure at their back door, that security camera installation, motion lights, family taking precautions. I want to be clear with y'all about something important here, because this story walks a really fine line, and I don't want to oversell it into something it's not. Nobody ever broke into the Caldwell house. Nothing ever happened to Sophie, or to Ethan, or to anyone in that family. This is not a story with a violent ending. But here's what happened next, and I think it's actually the most important part of this entire story. The Caldwells took every single one of Ethan's drawings, all 4 of them, to the Springfield Police Department. Not because they expected the police to believe in psychic kids. They were upfront about that. They simply said, "Our son has been drawing some disturbing things. One of them appears to closely match an actual homicide case from last month, and the most recent one appears to depict our own home with a possible intruder. We don't know what to make of it, but we wanted it on record, and we want our home assessed for safety." Police officer reviewing documents, professional and calm demeanor. A detective named Ray Fonseca, who had actually been peripherally aware of the Oak Ridge case, looked at the drawings. He didn't dismiss them, and he also didn't treat them as supernatural evidence. He treated them the way a good investigator treats any piece of information, practically. He noted the similarity to the Oak Ridge case as an interesting but inconclusive coincidence, given the broad nature of children's depictions of violence. But he took the Prowler report seriously regardless, increased patrol frequency in the neighborhood for the following 2 weeks, and recommended the family install security cameras and motion sensor lighting, solid, practical advice regardless of the supernatural question hanging over the whole situation. The Caldwells installed the cameras within 48 hours. And here's the detail that closes out the active part of this story. About 10 days after the cameras went up, motion sensor footage captured a figure walking along the side of the Caldwell property, late at night, pausing at, exactly, the side window. Sophie's window. The same window Ethan had drawn as broken in his final drawing. The figure didn't attempt entry, didn't appear to notice the camera, just paused for almost 90 seconds and then walked away. The footage was turned over to police. The individual was never identified. No further activity was ever recorded. Quiet morning, family eating breakfast together, sense of resolved tension. After that, the drawing stopped completely. Ethan never drew another disturbing image again, not one. Within a few months, he was, by every account, a completely normal, happy 7-year-old. The headaches never came back. Marissa has said, in the limited interviews she's given about this, that she believes, and she's very clear that this is belief, not fact, that whatever was happening to Ethan was somehow connected to protecting their family. That the drawings, frightening as they were, may have been some kind of warning system. A 6-year-old's mind, somehow, processing danger before it became danger. Dr. Alvarez, for her part, has remained clinically neutral in any public statements, simply noting that childhood psychological phenomena that defy easy explanation are rare, but documented, and that the most important thing the Caldwell family did, regardless of the cause, was listen to their son and act on the information practically rather than dismissing it. So here's where the Caldwell family is now. Ethan is in middle school. By every account, he's just a normal kid. Plays baseball, still has her trunks a lot somewhere in his closet, even though he'd never admit it to his friends. He doesn't remember much about that period of his life. When his parents have gently brought it up, he mostly shrugs. Says he remembers having bad headaches as a little kid, but not much else. The drawings still exist. Marissa kept them, not in the kitchen drawer anymore, but in a sealed folder, in a fireproof box, in a closet she doesn't open often. So here's where the Caldwell family is now. Ethan is in middle school. By every account, he's just a normal kid. Plays baseball, still has her trunks a lot somewhere in his closet, folder, in a fireproof box, in a closet she doesn't open often. I think about this story a lot, y'all, and here's where I land on it. Whether you believe Ethan had some kind of genuine precognitive ability, or whether you believe this was an extraordinary chain of coincidence wrapped around a family's heightened fear and a child's overactive imagination, there is something underneath this story that I think is actually the real lesson. Marissa and Greg did not dismiss their kid. They didn't say boys will be boys and shove the drawings in a drawer forever. They didn't roll their eyes and move on. When something felt wrong, genuinely, persistently wrong, they investigated it. They got professional help. They went to the police. They installed cameras. They treated their child's experience, however strange and unexplainable, as something worth taking seriously. And maybe that's the actual takeaway here. Not whether 6-year-olds can see the future, but whether we, as parents, as people, are willing to actually listen, really listen, when someone we love is trying to tell us something feels deeply wrong, even when we don't have a framework to understand it yet. Because here's the unsettling question I want to leave you with tonight. What if the scariest part of this story isn't the drawings at all? What if it's how many other kids, in how many other houses, are trying to tell their parents something right now, and nobody's listening? Okay, y'all, I need to know what you think, because this one genuinely split my whole research team down the middle. Drop a comment. Do you think Ethan was picking up on something real? Or do you think this is a wild coincidence that snowballed because a scared mom connected dots that weren't really there? Both takes are valid. I want to hear them. If this story gave you chills, smash that like button right now. And subscribe, with the bell on. Next week we're covering Creepy 1.